I'm looking good.
A while back, I've made a video about the source ports for Duke Nukem 3D, and which one should you use it. And seeing the amount of success that video had, I thought to myself, why not do another video about source ports? But this time, it's for Blood. Blood is one of the greatest games of all time. In fact, the magnum opus when it comes to build engine games. However, it did have a curse. You see, many boomer shooter games, such as Duke Nukem, Doom, and Quake, had their source code released for the public, so that many fans would enhance the games in as many ways as they could, in the form of source ports for modern systems or even fan-made mods. Blood, on the other hand, wasn't so fortunate, as its source code hasn't been released to this day. That being said, this didn't stop Blood fans trying to recreate the game itself in a lot of ways. So today, we're going to talk about how did we went from this to this. Let's find out, shall we? Like I said earlier, while Blood competition like Duke Nukem 3D and Shadow Warrior had their source code released for the public, this didn't happen for Blood. So a campaign named Blood Source Campaign was launched in 1999. The campaign itself was meant to convince the folks from Monolith Productions, you know, the ones who made Blood, to release the source code of the game. At the time, the code was still proprietary. People from the campaign sent emails to 3D Realms, Monolith Productions, and GT Interactive, who they were the publishers for Duke 3D, Shadow Warrior, Doom, and Blood. They emailed to ask for the release of the source code of the game, as well as some legal questions along the way. Unfortunately, in spite of their efforts, the campaign got shut down in November 2001. The campaign was founded by Greg Enright, aka FrightFan, and later he handed the job over to Monty Hale or Protoplasmic. Timothy also promised to maintain Planet Blood, which was a fan site sanctioned by the GameSpy network. The site itself had a lot of things, whether being fanfiction, mods, and even fan art. Sadly, the site was inactive in 2006. It was still online, but it was destroyed in 2009 when GameSpy took down a lot of inactive websites, including Planet Shogo, which was a fan site for the fans of the Shogo franchise. With the campaign being dead, it was an unfortunate fate for Blood fans, as the only way to play Blood back then was playing on DOS. However, this didn't stop Blood fans to try, or at the very least, recreate the Blood experience, and one of the first attempted recreations was Transfusion. Also known as Q-Blood, was a project that started on March 2001. It was developed by the folks from the BSC, aka Blood Source Campaign, Greg Enright, Timothy Hale, and Matthew Oliver. It was a project that ran under the Dark Places engine, which was essentially a modified Quake engine. The project itself aimed at recreating the Blood levels, including the expansions. Currently, the fan-made game only supported Bloodbath games, basically deathmatch for those who played Doom or Duke 3D. Their main objective was basically completing the single-player mode, which in itself put a huge toll to the team. Sadly, the project was dormant between 2005 and 2007, but in 2009 it woke up, and while it had some active development in 2010, there were some controversies about single-player plan, with members from the project saying that they needed a stronger core engine before working it, as well as the replacement of Quake-ish gameplay in physics and emulating Blood gameplay in physics. On December 3rd, 2010, Christopher Steele, aka Dusty Sticks, left the project as well as shutting down the Transfusion website, although the website was restored by William Whalep. Transfusion was not the only fan-made recreation of Blood. Over the years, there have been some recreation projects like Hall of Stone Edge, which was essentially a total conversion for Wolfenstein 3D, Z-Blood, and ReBlood. But among these fan-made projects, there was one that stood above the Bloody Rest and set the foundation for many source ports. The project is none other than Blood CM. This was a total conversion for eDuke 32, which was a source port of Duke Nukem 3D that was aimed to replicate the Blood experience using eDuke 32. The total conversion was developed by Alexander Makarov, aka M210, and the project started in 2008 with the goal of porting the game levels. However, over time, he manually recreated all the enemy logic and game mechanics from the ground up to mimic the original game. The maps were converted with a tool named Blood to Build, which essentially converted Blood maps into build maps. The total conversion gathered high praise by Blood fans, as it was able to distinguish itself from other fan-made recreations by being truly faithful to the original game, for the time that is. It was released in 2012 and it got updated until 2017. At the time, like I said, was probably the best way to play Blood during this period. That being said, there were some things that weren't included in the total conversion due to limitations, like the lack of deathmatch co-op, cutscenes were unsupported, and there was no recreation of cryptic passage maps for the total conversion. Even so, despite of these said limitations, the fact Blood fans were able to play this game with tons of enhancements was nothing short of miracles, considering that this was made by one guy and what he did was amazing. All in all, Blood CM might be outclassed by other source ports that we'll mention later, but it's considered as a historical moment in the modding community, but also fueled a renaissance for the game. It had a pivotal moment as the catalyst behind the many source ports of Blood that we had today. And speaking of, let's talk about the source port that became one of the best ways to play Blood that outclassed the total conversion. BuildGDX, or back in its heyday, BloodGDX, was a source port that was announced on January 9th, 2017. It was developed by the same goat, Makarov, and it was released on May 19, 2017. BloodGDX was actually created by reverse engineering the original game, but the leaked 1996 alpha version of Blood was also referenced. According to Makarov, he said, "BloodGDX is a more perspective project than BloodCDM. I started reverse engineering of original BloodGDX because I successfully found main build engine methods like rotate sprites, draw rooms, etc. In this way, I had got 50% of Blood source code and 20% of methods I found in alpha version source code. Some methods are without changes. Also, alpha source code helped me with figuration of my decompiled code. My Blood port is based on Java's libgdx framework, and it can read all original Blood maps and original Blood resources and playing as original Blood at this time. Perhaps there is a difference between Blood 1.21 and my port because I'm working on the compilation of 1.0. 1.1 is more readable after reverse engineering than 1.21. After my first release of BloodGDX, I can start fix graphics bugs, rewrite render, and writing models and voxels and high-res texture support. Upon its release, it gathered bloody rave reviews, with fans praising the source port being not just superior to BloodCM as well as DOSBOX, but it was the definitive play to play Blood at the time. BloodGDX had tons of features that the DOS version lacked, like better frame rates, right screen support, texture filtering, improved mouse look, and even demo playbacks, which was amazing. Over time, Makarov updated BloodGDX to support other build engine games like Shadow Warrior, Duke 3D, Power Slave, and even Redneck Rampage. This caused Makarov to change the name of the source port from BloodGDX to BuildGDX, and the rest is history. With that said, BuildGDX wasn't the only source port for Blood. There was another challenger. NBLood is another Blood source port which uses Duke 32 as a base. It was made by Alexei Kokolov, aka Duke.ykt, who also developed Red Nukem, which is another source port that supported Duke 3D, Duke 64, and Redneck Rampage, that aimed for a much more refined accuracy. This source port is really accurate when it comes to the vanilla experience, and unlike BloodGDX or BuildGDX, it's actually a native application, whereas BuildGDX ran under a Java runtime environment. This makes NBLood having better performance than BuildGDX, especially on software rendering, which is allegedly 2.5 times faster than BuildGDX on software mode. Its execution is pretty similar to BuildGDX in terms of visuals, sound, and gameplay, but NBLood has an option to enable version 1.0 weapon balance, which in the original version of Blood, not the version 1.21, had tons of weapons that were still being refined, but the option is there for those who want that experience. As for modding, NBLood does support all the add-ons that have been made by fans and for the fans, like Death Wish, Fresh Meat, Marrow, and even What Lies Beneath. And while that's not to say BuildGDX doesn't support add-ons, some add-ons like What Lies Beneath are only compatible with NBLood due to its different features, so keep that in mind if you want to play mods on BuildGDX. In my Duke Nukem 3D source port video, I briefly mentioned that RAZE also supported other build engine games, and Blood is no exception to the rule. As far as differences goes, there isn't much else to talk about it. It does have nice post-processing effects, which is nice, and it uses NBLood. So everything that I've talked about NBLood can apply to this, and I don't want to repeat myself. So moving on. NotBlood is actually a fork of NBLood that adds tons of quality of life improvements like auto-saving, auto-crouching, custom difficulty options taken from BuildGDX, but with more options like pitchfork start every level, and even adding a permadeath option in which if you die, you start all over again. But wait, there's more. This port also has gameplay alterations like changing a Kimbo power-up to a Quake-like COD damage, bullet tracer for its scanners, increasing gore, improved collision detection for projectiles like TNT, napalm fireballs, etc., respawning enemies for the single-player campaign, and even the ability to randomize enemies and pickups. Since this is a fork of NBLood, it's just as accurate as NBLood. You might be wondering, NBLood gets updates to be compatible with future mods. Does NotBlood follow the same path? In a word, yes. NotBlood does support all the add-ons made by Blood fans. If they work on NBLood, they certainly work on NotBlood as well, at least to my knowledge. On December 7, 2018, it was announced that a remaster of Blood was going to be released by the folks of Night Dive Studios, who to this day have been on killing spree on remastering old school FPS games like Quake 1 and 2, Doom, Power Slave, and even Heretic and Hexen. The remaster was actually based on reverse engineering, similar to how Blood did, rather than using the original source code. It was developed by Samuel Villarreal aka Kaiser, and it was going to be running under the Kex engine, which was used in a lot of Night Dive remasters that I mentioned before. The remaster was released on May 9th, 2019 on Steam and GOG, and how did it go? Did it go with a bloody boom?
You serious?
Sadly, not quite. In its debut release, the port has been harshly criticized by a lot of Blood fans, Civ11, and even the folks from Duke4.net for not being totally faithful to the original game, compared to the other source ports like NBLood and BuildGDX. It was much less accurate. Hell, even the DOSBOX version, which I know it's not a source port, was better than Fresh Supply. Hendrix266 has said his thoughts about the Night Dive release. Blood Synthetic Substitute is an illegitimate imposter, and NBLood and BloodGDX are both viable ways to truly play Blood. Which one works better comes down to the details of what you're looking for. And I totally agree with him. On top of that, it was incompatible with demo playbacks and even add-ons like Death Wish, although the latter was later fixed, which thanks Chernobog for that. Even so, the remaster still got positive reception. Now, to be fair, this wasn't even Night Dive's fault. It was definitely Atari's fault. If they didn't rush this shit, this would have been much better. Credit where credit is due, Fresh Supply got updates, having some inaccuracies fixed, which was pretty delightful, but there was a little itsy-bitsy problem. It stopped having updates after August 5th, 2019, which angered some Blood fans. Not all of them, considering they still thought that NBLood was superior than Fresh Supply. However, fast forward like 6 years later, out of nowhere, Atari and Night Dive announced that a new version of the remaster named Refresh Supply, and this one was interesting, because not only would it be released for Windows and Linux, but also on consoles as well. You might be asking yourselves, surely that they redeemed themselves with this version, right? Right?
You serious?
Nope, there was a small issue. You know how every old school FPS was going to get a remaster, and if you own the original set game, you would get a Night Dive remaster for free? Well, it appears that Atari and Warner Brothers completely said, fuck that. You're going to pay at least 10 euros for a limited time. Doesn't matter if you own Fresh Supply, you're gonna still fork up some cash for this. Oh, and you're also gonna increase the price to 30 euros after a while, just to piss everyone off. This decision was pretty baffling. They had a perfect opportunity to please the Blood fans, and they still fucked up. So, what does the Refresh Supply offer? Well, this version features a more robust gameplay core based on the game's source code, reworked cutscenes, and similar to Doom plus Doom 2, it also features a vault of development stuff, which is pretty neat. What about the new content? Does it have? No. It features Death Wish and Marrow, but that's about it. No new original content. which really sucks, seeing that a lot of Night Dive remasters like Quake 2, Hexen, and Doom had original new content. That really sucks. If it had a new original campaign, maybe just maybe I would fork up 10 euros and buy it, but nope. Now granted, for those who have never played Blood before, then the remaster is actually a good way to experience it. But for 27 euros, that's a step price for such an old game with no original content whatsoever. If you really want to play this game, then get it on a sale. Trust me. But for me, sadly I say no, because I own Fresh Supply and expected more from Atari and Warner Brothers. They should've get this update for free for those who own Fresh Supply. Just saying. And worse is that Fresh Supply got delisted. Oops. So in short, I didn't buy Fresh Supply, and fuck Atari and Warner Brothers for this nonsense. They fumbled hard. What a shame. While not a source port, DOSBOX is a DOS emulator which, as the name suggests, allows to emulate DOS games. Before the days of source ports, DOSBOX was the only way to play Blood. It was included with the 1-unit whole Blood on Steam, as well as Fresh Supply, believe it or not. So, how's the experience? Well, I gotta say, it's better than Duke 3D on DOSBox, although the issues with mouse look still persist. However, unlike in Duke 3D on DOS, you could actually crank the resolution up to 1200p, which is overkill, and I'm pretty sure it would set a PC on fire back in the 90s. However, did you know that there's a reverse engineered Blood executable for DOS, known as Blood RE? And it was made by the same guy that made NBLood, so it all makes sense. But wait, there's more! A fork of this executable named DOSBLOOD, which fixed this infamous safe scaling bug that the original DOS version had, as well as having features from NBLood backported to the executable, making the DOS version much more playable, and with the mouse fixes from being mouse incorporated into the executable, the mouse look feels more snappy and better. So, should you play the DOS version of Blood? Well, sort of. It's not bad, but the other source ports totally outclass it. But if you want to be a total boomer who doesn't give a damn about source ports and wants to play it raw, then go for it, Blood Soldier. Going off tangent, when it comes to Blood source ports, this frontend supports all of the existing build engine games, but also comes with a lot of benefits. Allowing to play the game using multiple source ports, it automatically detects any build engine game that you've installed, whether being from Steam. You can also download custom mods, maps for support games like Duke 3D and Blood. You can also load multiple mods at the same time without doing some editing on the .def files from said mods. In my opinion, I definitely recommend it if you want a more convenient way to play these games. And as far as compatibility goes, at the time I'm writing this video, the frontend only supports Windows. But if you're on Linux, you can run this frontend as well as the source ports via Wine, and the performance is just as good as you're playing them on Windows. So huge thanks to FGS FDS for the frontend. Speaking personally, this is a question that has been living rent-free in my head, and I'm sure Blood fans would feel the same way that I'm feeling. And the question would be, does having the source code of the game benefit all the source ports? This might be a hot take, but the answer would be no. Now hear me out. While having the source code being released would be a huge W for Blood fans like me, I think that it would be irrelevant for the source ports, seeing that all of these ports were basically reverse engineered to the point that they are 100% accurate to the original DOS executable. Now, should they release the source code for historic purposes? Absolutely yes. It would be nice to know how the game works, the ins and outs, so on and so forth. So, short answer, yes, they should, but it won't benefit that much for the existing source ports. But for historic purposes, it will be useful. And I'm gonna say huge thank you to the people who made these amazing ports, because had it not been for these wonderful people, Blood would have been stuck to the DOSBox age. And they did this for the love of the game and passion, and most importantly, for game preservation, so that it can be accessible for modern systems and for a new generation of Blood fans. Thanks for watching.
ダメだねダメよダメなのよあんたが好きで好きすぎてどれだけ強いお酒でも歪めない想い